Hey, in this video, I'm going to be reflecting on my third year. I'm currently in fourth year medical school, my last year, which is insane. I'm going to be reflecting on third year and answering questions that were given to me by current third year medical students and some questions I got on Instagram. All right, so let's get into it. I have my nice latte made here at home. My little pooch, little Nala's down there. Maybe I'll bring her up for a video. Hold on. Nala, come. You little Nala. Nala's gonna be in the room during the video. And let's get into it. The first question. So the first question is, what would you tell the second year Chiago entering third year looking back now based on what you know? One thing that I would say is that it's not as bad as you think it's gonna be. I thought third year and fourth year would be so challenging. And it was challenging, but it was not as daunting as I once imagined it. One of the biggest tips that I can give you is that you need to focus on the 20% of things, 20% of topics that will get you 80% of your marks. Learn to skim your objectives, learn to pick out the high yield topics in medicine and just for your tests as well. Learn those very well, because those are what's going to be on the test and what you're going to get asked in life, right? We have so many objectives, we cannot cover all of them. So spend your time on the high yield topics. For example, we have a student made Anki flashcard deck, and for surgery, it's over 3,000 flashcards. There's no way I could get through those. So what I did is I went through them, most of them, and narrowed it down to 600. From the 3,000 cards, I studied 600 and I did well on the surgery exam. So look for those areas in life in your year where you can be very efficient. Ask yourself, is this worth knowing? Is this worth spending time? Is this something I'm going to use in the future? And if not, throw it out, because if it's important, you'll learn it later in the future. The other piece of advice I would give to that incoming third year is that learn to enjoy your time outside of school. That's going to be easier during some rotations like emergency medicine and a lot harder during surgery. But it's very important that once you get home, you find a way to enjoy your time. So what I did during the summer is I did a lot of paddle boarding after internal medicine and emergency, and that made my life so much better. And it was just horrible in the winter because of surgery, and it was dark in the morning, dark at night. So you got to really figure out how to make studying more enjoyable. Moving on to question number 2, it says, what's the time split between classes / studying versus in the hospital? How do you balance it? That's going to vary a lot depending on what specialty you're in. When you're on surgery, there's very little time to actually study outside of the work environment. But when you're on family medicine, psychiatry, emergency, there's a lot more time to study. What I will point out is that most of our rotations have a 1 week of academic week where it's just online lectures or in-person lectures now, where you learn about high yield topics, and then the next couple of weeks will be 4 or 5 weeks will be all clinical or hospital based. For emergency though, we would have about 1 to 3 days of lectures during the week, and then every other day we would be working. So our actual off days were academic days or workshop days. In regards to fitting in studying during your rotations, this is going to vary, but do everything you can to study either before you go to work or after. So what I did is I woke up every day around 5:30, which is really nice because then no matter what rotation, I was up early and had time to prepare. And I always did flashcards, I would skim my notes. So that way somehow I am passively absorbing information or actively if I'm doing questions. And that turned out to be very helpful just to create this habit, this routine of always being in the books. But I will share this. One of the things that every single resident, every doctor shares is that you should read around your cases. It makes the information sticky. It sticks to your mind. So if you see a patient that has asthma in the family clinic, go home, read around the case of asthma, how to diagnose it, the clinical features, and how to treat it. That sounds very ideal, but guaranteed when you go home, you're gonna be exhausted. So do what you can, don't kick yourself in the butt. Just try to improve a little bit each day, and eventually you will learn this information. The more you see it, the more it will stick. I will warn you of this though, is that As the year went on, I definitely had less energy. So if you're towards the end of your clerkship year and you have less energy, less motivation to study, that's completely normal. There was a burnout point for me. I felt like I was burnt out for a couple of months after surgery. And so just learn to listen to your body and your mind, take a step back, enjoy more time with family and friends, let your body recover, and then get back at it again. Before we move on to the third question, if you're new here, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Thiago. I am a 4th year medical student, and on this channel, I show you what the life of a medical student is and give you tips and tools on how to be more productive, live a healthier and happier life. Please hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, drop a comment and ask a question. I love engaging with you in the comments. Let's get to question number 3. Question number 3 says, how did you deal with the feeling of lack of knowledge / inadequacy when starting clerkship and asked questions? So the question here is, how do you deal with not enough syndrome, which every medical student gets? So the feeling of being or feeling inadequate is completely normal with every stage of life where you're kind of improving. In medicine, there's so much knowledge. It's so vast that you can't possibly know everything, and you can't really feel confident in everything that you do know because it's changing. And so my tip to you is feel okay with saying, I don't know. I said those words so much throughout this year that at some points it felt embarrassing, like I should know this information, but I didn't hold that against me. Like, this is stuff that I might have learned 1 or 2 years ago, and it's just not fresh in my mind. And so I just told the resident or the preceptor that I just don't know the answer. I would give my best shot. I would give them my differential, what I think might be the answer. But if I literally had no clue, I wouldn't even, guess. It's not worth wasting our time. And for the most part, every single resident and doctor was really nice, and they just tell me the answer, or they'd give me clues to figure out the answer on my own. So do not worry about feeling inadequate, feeling like you don't know. That's a normal feeling, which I hear from friends is going to be normal into residency, normal into being a full attending, and maybe 5-10 years down the line, you feel a little bit more confident with most things in your specialty. But for now, it's okay to say, I don't know. All right, question numero 4. In your experience, how did you find the preceptor's expectations were when it came to you passing the rotations for knowledge and organizational skills? It's gonna vary so much. There's some rotations where I barely talked to a preceptor. Like general surgery, it was mostly just resident run, and rarely would I see the actual doctor. Maybe I would definitely see them in the surgery, but that's it. For emergency, you're working one-on-one with each preceptor, and the expectations vary a lot. But considering you're going to be a 3rd year, if you're watching this video, the doctors don't have a huge expectation for you. They just want you to do your best, put your best foot forward, ask questions, tell them when you don't know so that they can teach you. And one example is that if you go see a patient, take a history, and you forget to ask a specific question, right? Like, did you have nausea and vomiting? And you forget that. You just admit it. You tell them that maybe you go back and just clarify that, and they're completely okay with that. Or they will go with you and then complete the history. They understand that you're learning, you're at the very beginning, and the expectations are not going to be at the level of a resident, and definitely not a level of an attending doctor. So most doctors are there, they've been teaching for a couple of years, they see students every single day, and it's completely okay to not know everything and miss a couple of things. Now, some preceptors are a lot more rigid or a lot more structured. So if you miss certain things, they will point it out and make sure you don't forget. Other preceptors like that you present a patient case a certain way. They want the differential diagnosis up first, or other doctors want the differential diagnosis last. It changes, and you're just gonna have to adapt to the doctor that you're working with. In regards to organizational skills though, you just follow what the residents do. For the most part, you're working with residents. Ask them how they ask questions, how they do physical exams, or how they write notes. You can look at the notes that other doctors have written, use their templates if the EMR has that, and just go off of that, and slowly you'll start to build your own repertoire or tools that you're going to use throughout your entire career. Now, interestingly enough, the specialty that demanded the most organization or precision, or that asked me a lot of questions, was anesthesiology, because you're just sitting there doing nothing as a med student, really. And so they're asking you questions to see if you're studying, and they had the highest expectations, which threw me off. But that was an interesting experience. I still enjoyed anesthesia, but it's going to be different for everybody. All right, question number 5. How did you navigate the rotations you weren't super interested in? Are you in survival mode, or you still try to go that extra mile? And so my view of each rotation never changed. It was the same, whether I wanted to do family medicine or surgery or I didn't. I gave the same amount of effort in each rotation. That could be either good or bad, I guess, depending if I gave poor effort in each rotation. But I never tried to be a perfectionist, because that mentality always leads to failure, always leads to burnout and depression, because you cannot impress every preceptor or you cannot impress every patient. And so what I do is I did the best that would leave me content, leave me happy with the amount of work that I'm doing, and that would give me enough energy at the end of the day to spend with my wife, with my hobbies, so I have energy to make these YouTube videos, to do podcasts and exercise, and I'll spend time with my cute little puppy down there who's sleeping. Now, when I say I didn't work to my best capacity to be a perfectionist, what I'm saying is that it's not that I gauge each interaction and aim to do 50%. What's interesting is that when you start your clinical rotation, when you start seeing a patient, you just get into gear. There's a switch that turns on and you're just like, okay, let's do it. I gotta ask these questions. We're gonna do these investigations. We're gonna do this treatment. And you do your best with the knowledge that you have. But if there's this extra amount of information that you don't have but would take 20-30 minutes to learn or research, I'm not gonna really go that extra mile if it's not necessary. Now, if I talk with the resident and they encourage me to dig deeper, to learn, to look up an article, to look up a treatment, I would definitely do that. But I will function on the side of preserving energy, because the burnout that comes from doing perfectionistic levels of output is not worth it. It's literally not worth it at all. But if you get into 4th year and you're trying to get a reference letter from a doctor and you want to really impress them, then maybe you got to kick up that gear a notch just for that day or for that couple of weeks that you're working with the doctor to get a really good letter. So the key here is that no matter what you do in life, you have to set boundaries. There are boundaries I was not willing to cross in medicine because it would interfere with the energy I have in my personal life. I wouldn't be able to dedicate the time I need to dedicate to my wife, my dog, and my other hobbies. Question number 6, how did you prepare / organize yourself to study after work in clerkship compared to pre-clerkship? How did you find clerkship exams, rotations dependent, compared to pre-clerkship? So what I found is that clerkship is really geared towards management. It's geared towards diagnostics. So what kind of imaging studies would you order? What kind of blood tests would you order? And then how would you treat a certain condition? Whereas pre-clerkship is really focused on pathophysiology. How does heart failure take place? What is the mechanism? What are the forces? How does the electrical impulse go from the SA node to the AV node and so on? That is what pre-clerkship is all about, teaching the foundation. But then clerkship is really, all right, we know it's roughly wrong, but how do you identify it, and then how you treat it? And so when you study, you want to spend most of your time studying the diagnostics and then the management. And guaranteed, if you do that, you'll do fine. Don't spend a lot of time in the pathophys. It's good to know. If you have extra time, go back and understand the root cause or how things happen. But for test purposes, diagnostics and management all the way. So practically, like I never really figured out a way to properly study during clerkship. It was hit or miss every single time, but I for the most part, use flashcards. And so what I recommend is, if you have pre-made flashcards, is go through the browse feature and suspend everything. Suspend all the cards. And then toggle unsuspend all the cards that have to do with diagnosis, in management, and anything else you feel is high yield or that you want to know. So you'll take it down from the 3,000 cards to 600, and then just review those cards every day or every couple of days. Doing Anki every day is very challenging in Clerkship, so you probably won't be able to keep that up. The other thing is, if you don't have pre-made flashcards, but you have student notes, objective notes, or even Toronto notes, you can go through the PDF, screenshot the question or screenshot the information, and just paste it into your Anki card. So that way it's just really fast. You don't get tired of typing, but you get the information in the card and you can review it shortly after. Question number 7. Did Clerkship confirm the specialty you were interested in pre-Clerkship, or have you had a change of heart? If so, why? No change of heart here. I definitely know I want to go into family medicine. So since the start of medical school, I knew that I wanted to do family medicine. When I first got into the idea of medical school and becoming a doctor, I want to do orthopedic surgery because I have a cousin who does that, and I thought it was really cool. But once you start learning about surgery, lifestyle, and everything else, I was like, that's not for me. It doesn't really match my personality. And now, this answer varies with each medical student you talk to. So for me, most of Clerkship, it confirmed that I didn't want to do certain specialties. Through the rotation, I knew I didn't want to do pediatrics. Surgery confirmed I did not want surgery. I didn't want to do ENT. A friend of mine, he's the opposite. He loves each and every specialty. So he had a very difficult decision narrowing down on a specialty because he enjoyed each one. And so I find it's very personality based. It's dependent on the preceptors you work with, whether you're in the English stream or French stream here in Ottawa. It's just very different. But for me, family medicine is the way to go. And rotating in family medicine showed me how I want to set up my practice and things that I want to avoid when I do set up my practice in the future. And question number 8 is, how did Clerkship affect your personal life and you as a person as a whole in terms of your well-being? What coping strategies did you have that you would recommend others? Sorry, my dog is dreaming and I'm not sure if you can hear that. She's barking in her dream. I got distracted. All right, so did I change personally? And what coping strategies do I have? Okay. So Clerkship affected my life in such a way that I had to put a lot of things on hold, a lot of my hobbies. So last year, I started this online coaching productivity course, and I've helped multiple students, and it was very satisfying and fulfilling, and I want to get back to it. But there's just no way that I could continue Clerkship and continue this coaching course. So I had to put that on the shelf. There's no way I could continue coaching and YouTubing and podcasting and spending time with my wife. So what I did is I put my priorities first. So I need to finish school and become a doctor, and I need to make sure that my wife is content and that we stay happily married. So I put my wife before everything, and then school, and then I fit everything else when I could. I recorded YouTube videos sporadically whenever I had time. I would vlog. If my coaching students needed some answers, I would text them and I would give them answers. I would jump on calls if needed. And right now I have to work on my residency application. So the busyness continues. You just have to figure out how to make everything work together so that you don't ultimately get sucked into medicine, which is so easily to do. Next, I don't believe Clerkship affected me as a person or my well-being. It definitely made me more stressed because of the constant worry about studying and then doing well on rotations. And I had a lot less time to invest in my physical health. So whenever I had time, I tried to do a workout in my living room with some weights with some resistance bands that I have. But what's interesting is that in Clerkship, it definitely opened up my eyes in regards to the different perspectives that doctors have. Some are really gung-ho about every single guideline, and they preach it to you, and it's like a religion. And then there's other doctors I interact with that can't really speak out or wouldn't even tell me really what they disagree of because they're afraid of losing their licenses. So it shows the politics within medicine, and it's very interesting to talk to doctors on both sides and just listen to stories. And so while that didn't change my personal well-being, it does impact how I view and work with other doctors, and impacts what I choose to share with colleagues, because there's a lot of very aggressive mindsets out there, especially with people following what they think is the science, but science changes. And so within the last 2-3 years, with COVID going around and research coming up, it's been very interesting listening to conversations and seeing how hostile the workspace can be, regardless if it's medicine. It can be hostile in any place you can go now because everything is so politicized. So my tip would be nice to each other. Don't assume that you're right. Don't even assume that the research you're looking at now is right and going to always be right, because it can change like that. The last point is, what are some coping strategies? So the coping strategies that I have, that I recommend, is spend some days with your friends and family. I've been blessed that I'm married, so I have Jess to hang out with, and now I have a little dog to hang out with as well. But during July, Jess and I bought a paddleboard. So during my emergency rotation, we would go paddleboarding every 2 to 3 days. We get a lot of sun, we go swimming, and just enjoy the days off. And so figure out, what are your hobbies, what are your interests? Do you have friends you can hang out with? If not, go make some friends, because that really makes your experience a lot better. Don't get so caught up on studying that you forget to live your life. And remember that it's okay to not be productive. And I had to do a lot of thinking about this because I have an online productivity course. I've often thought of myself as this productive guy, but over the last year, it's really important that you learn to take a step back and be okay with relaxing and just doing nothing, because sometimes that's all you have the energy to do, nothing, and that's okay. If you're Christian, if you're somebody of faith, then go to church, hang out with people of this similar belief and faith. I can speak to that because I'm a Christian. If you're somebody with a different faith, then do your own thing, whatever that is. There's so many options out there. Well, I hope those answers were helpful. Love you guys. God bless, and I'll see you on the next video.